Some betrayals don't happen in the dark. They are performed in public, under the bright lights of a luxury restaurant. This is the story of a calculated public cruelty of a husband who looked a waitress in the eye and, referring to the woman carrying his children, said, "Don't serve her. She's just the surrogate." He believed it was the final move in his secret plan, a quiet dismissal before he disappeared to start a new life. He never imagined his wife, the brilliant doctor he had so foolishly underestimated, was about to walk through that very door, pushing a stroller with the twins he had no idea were already born. This isn't just a story of infidelity. It's a masterclass in whole justice. Dr. Evelyn Hayes had a life that looked like a perfectly curated magazine spread. Her sprawling home in a leafy Austin, Texas suburb, with its gleaming hardwood floors and floor-to-ceiling windows, was a testament to her success as a leading obstetrician at St. David's Medical Center. She spent her days surrounded by the miracle of new life. She held the hands of anxious mothers, calmed the fears of first-time fathers, and her skilled hands were often the first to welcome a new soul into the world. Her colleagues respected her, her patients adored her, and her husband, Mark Thompson, seemed to worship the ground she walked on. Mark was the other half of their golden couple image, a charismatic financial advisor with a portfolio of high-net-worth clients. He was handsome, attentive, and unfailingly supportive of Evelyn's demanding career. He'd be the one to have a gourmet dinner waiting when she came home late after a difficult delivery, a glass of her favorite Cabernet Sauvignon already poured. He managed their finances with what she believed was meticulous care, assuring her their future was as bright and secure as their present. But beneath the polished surface of their life, a quiet, persistent ache throbbed. The one thing Evelyn's medical expertise and Mark's unwavering support couldn't grant them was a child of their own. Their journey had begun with optimism, a natural extension of their love. But a year turned into 2, then 5. The casual attempts gave way to the cold, sterile world of fertility clinics. Evelyn, the accomplished doctor, became just another patient, subjected to the same invasive tests, the same hormonal roller coasters, the same crushing disappointments she witnessed in her own practice. They went through 3 rounds of IVF, each one a universe of hope that collapsed into a black hole of grief. The final diagnosis was a gut-punch, unexplained infertility, a cruel medical shrug. It was Evelyn who finally tearfully uttered the word surrogacy. Mark was hesitant at first, or so he seemed. "Are you sure, Ev? It's a lot. Another person involved in something so intimate. Mark, I need this," she had whispered one night, her voice raw after another friend's baby announcement. "I need to be a mother. I see it every single day. I feel it in my bones. If this is the only way..." He held her, then stroking her hair. "Okay, honey. If this is what you need, then it's what we'll do. We're a team. We'll build our family no matter what it takes." The agency they chose was reputable, expensive, and thorough. It led them to Sarah Jenkins. Sarah was 28, a single mother to a bright 7-year-old boy named Leo. She worked as a teaching assistant, and her profile radiated a warmth and stability that instantly appealed to Evelyn. In their first video call, Sarah was nervous but direct. "I want to be clear about why I'm doing this," Sarah said, her hands clasped on the table in her small, tidy apartment. "My mum has early onset Alzheimer's. The care facility that can give her what she needs is... well, it's beyond my means. This compensation would change her life." And she added a genuine smile touching her lips. I love being pregnant. It was the happiest time of my life. The thought of being able to give that gift to someone who wants it so badly. It feels right." Evelyn's heart swelled with gratitude. She saw not a transaction but a partnership. Mark handled the financial and legal arrangements with his characteristic efficiency, setting up a trust for the payments and ensuring the contracts were ironclad. He called it the project, a term that made Evelyn flinch slightly, but she chalked it up to his business-oriented mind. The embryo transfer was successful on the first attempt. And then at the 6-week scan came the news that left them all breathless twins. Evelyn sobbed with joy, clutching Mark's hand so tightly her knuckles were white. 2 heartbeats, 2 tiny flickering lights on the screen. It was more than she had ever dared to dream. Mark was ecstatic, scooping her up in a hug and laughing. 2 for the price of 1. Ev, we hit the jackpot. It was a clumsy joke, but Evelyn, blinded by happiness, let it slide. They were going to be a family. A big, noisy, wonderful family. The first few months of the pregnancy were a blissful blur. Evelyn insisted on being Sarah's primary point of contact, texting her daily, asking about her symptoms, and sending care packages filled with comfortable maternity wear, prenatal vitamins, and organic snacks. She attended every doctor's appointment, her eyes welling up each time she saw her babies growing on the ultrasound monitor. She was the doctor, but in those moments, she was just the mother. Mark was supportive, but in a more detached way. He'd ask for the status report after each appointment. When Sarah experienced morning sickness, he sent a text. "Hope you're managing. Remember to stay hydrated for the babies." It was practical, not personal. Evelyn told herself it was just his way of coping with the lack of control. The fact that this monumental event was happening in someone else's body. As Sarah's belly swelled, so did Mark's controlling nature. The suggestions became directives. He sent Sarah a detailed list of approved foods, citing articles on fetal development. He questioned a weekend trip she planned to take to see her family, asking if the long car ride was advisable. "He's just anxious," Evelyn would tell her sister Jessica over the phone. "He wants everything to be perfect." Jessica, ever the pragmatist, was less convinced. Anxious or controlling, Ev? There's a fine line. He talks about Sarah like she's a high-end incubator. He's leased. Jess, that's not fair. Evelyn defended him, a knot tightening in her stomach. He's just processing this differently. He's all about protecting his investment. They're not an investment, Evelyn. They're your children. And Sarah is a human being, not a piece of equipment. Evelyn ended the call feeling defensive, but Jessica's words lingered. She started noticing things. The way Mark's jaw would clench when Sarah mentioned feeling tired. The time he'd referred to the nursery they were building as my legacy wing. Small things, tiny cracks in the perfect facade. But they were there. The baby shower was Evelyn's domain. She hosted it in their beautiful backyard, a sea of pastel balloons and delicate white roses. Sarah was the guest of honor, looking radiant in a blue maxi dress Evelyn had bought for her. Evelyn showered her with gifts, not just for the babies, but for her, a spa gift certificate, a cozy robe, a subscription box for new mothers. For when you need to recover and reclaim your own body, Evelyn whispered to her, squeezing her hand. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Evelyn. You've been incredible. Mark mingled with the guests, accepting congratulations with a proud smile. He presented Sarah with a gift himself, a brand new top-of-the-line tablet. So you can keep us updated in real time, he announced to the room. And I've preloaded it with educational apps and classical music for the babies to listen to." The guests murmured in approval at his thoughtfulness. But Evelyn saw the look on Sarah's face, a flicker of discomfort at the public performative nature of the gift. It felt less like a present and more like another tool of surveillance. Later that evening, after everyone had left, Evelyn found a discrepancy while balancing her checkbook online. A charge for $800 at a high-end jewelry store, Rossi Fine Jewels. She didn't recognize it. "Mark," she called out. Her brow furrowed. "Did you buy some jewelry recently?" "There's a charge here from a place called Rossi's." He walked in, unbuttoning his shirt. He didn't miss a beat. "Oh, right. That was a client gift. Robert Henderson for his wife. Landed the Henderson tech account. It's huge. Had to send something impressive." It made sense. It was logical. Evelyn clicked the laptop shut, the unease dissipating. He was a good man. He was a thoughtful husband. She was just being paranoid, letting Jessica's cynicism get to her. She was 34 weeks pregnant, in a sense. Her babies were safe. Her husband loved her. Their perfect life was just on the horizon. She chose to ignore the cracks, unaware that the entire foundation was about to crumble. The final weeks of the surrogacy were a crescendo of anxiety and anticipation. The nursery was complete, 2 pristine white cribs standing side by side, a mobile of fluffy sheep dangling above them. Evelyn spent her evenings in there, folding tiny onesies. Her heart, a tangled mess of hope and a fear so profound it was almost paralyzing. What if something went wrong? What if she couldn't bond with them? Mark's behavior grew more erratic. The late nights at the office became more frequent. He'd come home smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't Evelyn's, a scent he'd quickly cover by heading straight for the shower. When she asked, he'd blame it on a client dinner or a networking event. You know how it is, Ev. People hug, they get close. It's the business world. He became obsessed with the birth plan. He drafted a multi-page document detailing everything from the route to the hospital to who was allowed in the delivery room. He designated himself as the primary decision-maker, with Evelyn as the secondary. "Mark, this is insane," Evelyn said, scanning the document. "I'm an obstetrician. I think I know how a delivery works. And Sarah has a say in this too. It's her body. It's my baby's," he retorted, his voice sharp. "I'm not leaving anything to chance. Sarah's job is to deliver the product safely. My job is to manage the process." The word product struck Evelyn like a physical blow. They are not a product, Mark. They are our children. It's semantics, Evelyn. "Don't get emotional," he said, dismissively, turning back to his laptop. The conversation was over. It was Sarah who first felt the chill of Mark's true nature. He started calling her multiple times a day, his tone no longer friendly but demanding. One afternoon he called while she was at the park with her son Leo. "Where are you?" "I can hear wind," he demanded. "I'm at the park with my son Mark. He had a half day at school." "A park? Is it clean? Are you overexerting yourself? You shouldn't be walking so much. The doctor said you need to rest." "Mark, I'm sitting on a bench watching my child play. I'm fine. I think I know my own limits." "I'm not so sure you do," he muttered just before hanging up. The call left Sarah shaken. The partnership she had entered into with such hope was beginning to feel like a prison. She felt like a vessel, a piece of property. Her only solace was Evelyn, whose texts were always kind and respectful, always asking about her, not just the babies. The first major tremor happened 2 weeks before the scheduled C-section. Sarah called Evelyn, her voice trembling. "Evelyn, I'm sorry to bother you, but something strange just happened." Mark came by the apartment. Evelyn's blood ran cold. He came by. Why, he was supposed to be in a meeting downtown. He said he needed me to sign some updated legal forms from the lawyer. But they were weird. It was an addendum, something about postnatal contact. It basically said I would have no contact with you or the babies after the birth, and any attempt to initiate contact would be a breach of contract with severe financial penalties. What Evelyn was stunned. We never discussed that. Our agreement allows for photos and yearly updates. I promised you that. I know, Sarah said, her voice small. I told him that, and he got angry. He said you were too emotional, and that he was handling the exit strategy. He said it was for the best to ensure a clean break. Evelyn. He scared me. He kept staring at my stomach and talking about his son. His son, Evelyn repeated, confused. You mean his children? No. He kept saying my son. He asked if the boy was still positioned on the left side. It was so specific, so odd. I refused to sign it, and he stormed out. Evelyn hung up the phone, her hands shaking. His son? The baby boy was indeed on the left. The girl was on the right. Why would he fixate on the boy? And an exit strategy. It sounded like a corporate takeover, not the birth of a family. The lie about the meeting downtown was a glaring red flag she could no longer ignore. That night, when Mark was in the shower, Evelyn did something she had never done before. She went into his office and opened his laptop. It was password protected, but she knew the password, or thought she did. Evelyn and Mark forever. Access denied. She tried their anniversary. Denied. She tried the baby's due date. Denied. Her heart pounded in her chest. On a whim, driven by a sickening suspicion, she typed in a name from the past, a name Mark hadn't mentioned in years. Isabella 1. Access granted. The screen opened to his email. The world tilted on its axis. Isabella. Isabella Rossi. Mark's college girlfriend, the fiery, ambitious artist he'd dated before her. The one he'd always described with a wistful laugh as the one that got away. The emails were a year's worth of a hidden life. Passionate exchanges, plans for secret meetings, complaints about his cold, career-obsessed wife. But it was the more recent messages that made Evelyn feel like she was going to be sick. From Isabella. Is the plan still on, my love? I've found the most perfect little house in Santa Fe. I can just picture you and me and our little boy starting over. From Mark. The plan is firmly in motion. The asset is almost mature. Just a few more weeks of dealing with the carrier and my wife's incessant emotional drama. The doctor thinks she has everything under control, but she has no idea what's coming. I've already moved a significant portion of our liquid assets to an offshore account she can't touch. By the time she figures it out, we'll be gone. You, me, and our son. James. I've decided to name him James. James. The boy. The asset. The carrier. Evelyn stumbled back from the desk, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a sob. It wasn't just an affair. It was a conspiracy. He wasn't just cheating on her. He was planning to steal her money, steal her son and disappear. He was going to leave her with her daughter and a shattered life, likely framing it as a tragic loss, one twin not making it. The jewelry store, Rossi Fine Jewels, it hadn't been a client gift. It had been for Isabella Rossi. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. His obsession with the boy, the legal form to silence Sarah, his control over the finances. Her world wasn't just cracking. It had been built on a foundation of lies that was now dissolving into sand. For a moment she couldn't breathe. The air in the opulent house felt thick and suffocating. The nursery down the hall seemed like a cruel joke. She wanted to scream, to smash everything, to confront him as he walked out of the shower. But then the doctor in her took over. The cool, methodical mind that assessed a crisis and formulated a plan. Screaming would get her nowhere. He would lie, gaslight her, and accelerate his plan. He had called her emotional predictable. She would be the opposite. She would be clinical. She would be strategic. He had started this war, but she, Dr. Evelyn Hayes, was going to finish it. She wiped her tears, her grief solidifying into a cold, hard diamond of fury. She took out her phone and made 2 calls. The first was to her sister Jessica. "Jess," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "I need your help. Bring a bag. We have to go to the hospital, and I need you to find me the best divorce lawyer in Texas." The second call was to Sarah. "Sarah, it's Evelyn. I need you to listen to me very carefully. Pack a bag for yourself and Leo. I'm sending a car for you in 30 minutes. You're coming to the hospital. Your C-section is happening tonight." The game had changed. Mark thought he was the puppet master, but he had underestimated the 2 women he was trying to destroy, and he had no idea that the curtain was about to rise on the final act, not in a hospital room, but in a place so public his ruin would be absolute. The 2 days that followed were a masterclass in deception, orchestrated by a woman, fueled by adrenaline and righteous fury. At St. David's, Evelyn was in her element. She leveraged every ounce of her professional authority. She called in her most trusted colleague, Dr. Miller, and explained a redacted version of the truth. "There's a severe and credible threat to the children's safety from their father. I need to move up the delivery, and I need it done quietly." No one questioned Dr. Hayes. Sarah was admitted under a different name, placed in a private wing, with restricted access. Jessica stayed with her, a loyal sentinel, while Evelyn put the rest of her plan in motion. The C-section was smooth and flawless. At 11:42 p.m., a beautiful, healthy baby girl, Amelia, was born. 2 minutes later, her brother James arrived, his cry lusty and strong. Evelyn held them both, tears streaming down her face. But these were not the tears of pure joy she had imagined. They were tears of fierce, primal protection. She looked at these 2 perfect beings, her daughter and her son, and the cold diamond of her fury hardened. He would not have them. He would not break them apart. While Sarah recovered, Evelyn and Jessica became the baby's guardians. They fed them, changed them, and held them close in a secure room in the neonatal unit. Evelyn, using her own resources, hired a private security guard to station outside the wing. Meanwhile, she played the part of the anxious, expectant mother to Mark. He called her, his voice a mask of concern. "Any news from the carrier?" he'd ask. "No, everything's quiet." Evelyn would reply, her voice steady, as she looked at her sleeping son. "Just waiting. I'm getting so nervous. Don't worry, honey. I'm handling it." Just a few more days, he'd soothe the condescension dripping from his words. He had no idea the babies were already born. He had no idea Sarah was safely tucked away, having already signed an affidavit with a lawyer Jessica had found detailing Mark's coercion and his disturbing fixation on the male twin. He had no idea Evelyn had already been in contact with a forensic accountant who was gleefully uncovering the web of offshore accounts and illicit transfers. The trap was set. Now all Evelyn needed was the stage. And Mark, in his infinite arrogance, provided it himself. 2 days after the birth, he sent a text, going to meet with Sarah to give her the final payment and have her sign the last of the paperwork. A public place is best for these things. The Four Seasons restaurant, 2 p.m. Just tying up loose ends before our family can begin. You should take a spa day, relax. Evelyn's smile was grim. Perfect. He was going to dismiss the woman who gave him his children, cut her off, and then proceed with his plan to steal one of them. The public setting was meant to intimidate Sarah to perform his power one last time. He didn't know it was going to be the stage for his own downfall. Evelyn got ready with meticulous care. She chose a steel-grey power suit, her hair pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. She looked less like a new mother and more like a CEO about to execute a hostile takeover. Jessica was with her, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. "Are you sure you can do this?" Evelyn looked at her sister in the mirror, her own eyes like chips of ice. "He built this life on a lie. I'm just going to tell the truth, loudly." She had arranged for Sarah to be there. Sarah, still recovering but resolute, agreed without hesitation. She deserved to see this through. She would arrive 10 minutes before Mark and sit at a secluded table, waiting for her cue. At 1:50 p.m., Evelyn and Jessica walked out of St. David's Medical Center. Evelyn was not empty-handed. She pushed a state-of-the-art double stroller, a beautiful, ridiculously expensive model Mark had insisted on buying. Tucked securely inside, swaddled in soft blue and pink blankets, were James and Amelia. They were the bombshells she was about to detonate. The restaurant at the Four Seasons was an oasis of hushed elegance. Soft piano music trickled through the air, mingling with the clink of silverware on fine china. Businessmen in tailored suits and ladies who lunch occupied the plush banquettes. Mark was already there, seated at a prime table. And he wasn't alone. Across from him, sipping a glass of champagne, was Isabella Rossi. Her fiery red hair was a stark contrast to the muted tones of the restaurant. She was laughing at something Mark had said, her hand resting intimately on his. At a small table near the back, Sarah watched them, her heart pounding. She had arrived as planned and ordered a water. Now she was playing her part. She stood up and walked towards Mark's table, her expression one of polite confusion. "Mark?" she said, her voice just loud enough to be heard by the surrounding tables. "I'm here for our meeting." Mark looked up, his smile vanishing. Annoyance flickered in his eyes. He hadn't expected her to approach him while he was with Isabella. He stood up, a gesture meant to be dismissive, to block her from the table. "Sarah, I'll be with you in a moment." "Go wait by the bar," he said in a low, sharp tone. Sarah stood her ground. "The hostess said you were at this table." "I just thought—" Isabella looked from Mark to Sarah, her perfectly arched eyebrows raising in question. "Mark, darling." "Who is this Mark?" Let out an exasperated sigh, his face a mask of patronizing charm for Isabella's benefit. He gestured vaguely at Sarah. "It's nobody. She's just the surrogate." He then turned to the approaching waitress, a young woman named Chloe, with a name tag pinned to her crisp white shirt. Mark didn't even look at her. He waved a dismissive hand toward Sarah. "Don't serve her," he said, his voice carrying an unmistakable air of command and contempt. "She's just the surrogate. She won't be needing anything." The words hung in the air, thick and poisonous. The waitress froze, her eyes wide with shock. The couple at the next table stopped their conversation. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. The public humiliation, the sheer cruelty of being rendered invisible, of being reduced to a function after everything she had been through, was staggering. She felt small, worthless, exactly as he intended her to feel. Isabella looked at Sarah's still recovering postpartum body, then back at Mark, a slow, dawning comprehension on her face. The surrogate Mark. What is this? But Mark never got to answer, because at that exact moment, the grand entrance of the restaurant opened, and in walked Dr. Evelyn Hayes. She was a vision of cold, righteous power. Her heels clicked with purpose on the marble floor. She wasn't crying. She wasn't hysterical. Her face was a placid mask of control. Pushed before her was the double stroller, a symbol of a reality Mark had no idea existed. She was followed closely by her sister Jessica, whose phone was held up discreetly, recording everything. Evelyn navigated through the tables, her eyes locked on her husband. A ripple of confusion went through the room. Who was this formidable woman? Mark's head snapped towards the entrance. His jaw dropped. The color drained from his face, replaced by a ghastly, sallow panic. He looked at Evelyn, then at the stroller, then back at Evelyn. His mind, usually so quick, couldn't process the scene. It was impossible. Evelyn reached the table. She didn't look at Sarah, not yet. She didn't look at the waitress. Her gaze was fixed entirely on the two people seated before her. She stopped the stroller right beside Isabella, giving her a perfect view of the two sleeping infants inside. She offered a smile that was all teeth. It was terrifying. Isabella Evelyn said, her voice dangerously calm. "It's been a long time. I see you've met my husband." She paused, letting the words sink in. "And Mark, darling?" she continued, turning her icy gaze on him. "I see you're busy with your exit strategy." Mark was sputtering, trying to form words to regain control of a situation that was spiraling into a nightmare. "Evelyn? What? How?" "But I have to correct you on one small point," Evelyn went on, her voice rising just enough to capture the attention of the entire now silent restaurant. She gestured gracefully towards the brave, shaken woman standing beside the table. "You told the waitress not to serve her. You called her just the surrogate." Evelyn took a step closer, her eyes blazing. "This woman's name is Sarah Jenkins. She is not an object. She is not a carrier. She is the magnificent, selfless woman who carried my children, my son James, and my daughter Amelia." She pointedly looked at the two babies in the stroller, then back at a stunned Isabella. Both of them, she said, her voice ringing with clarity. Alive, healthy, and with their mother. She placed a firm, protective hand on her own chest. "Me." The performance was over. The truth had been delivered. And the fallout was just beginning. The silence in the restaurant was absolute, a vacuum created by the implosion of Mark Thompson's life. Every eye was on their table, a tableau of betrayal and shock. Mark stared at the two babies, his face a mask of disbelief and horror. His plan, his meticulous, cruel plan, had been discovered and dismantled with surgical precision. Isabella Rossi was the first to break the spell. She looked from Mark's ashen face to the two infants, then to Evelyn's unyielding expression. The beautiful house in Santa Fe, the fantasy of a new life with a stolen baby, it all curdled in her stomach. "Our son," she whispered, her voice trembling with dawning revulsion. She turned on Mark. "You told me she couldn't carry a child. You told me the surrogate was for us. You said the other one wasn't viable." Mark flinched as if struck. "Isabella, listen to me." "No," she said, standing up so quickly her chair scraped loudly against the floor. She looked at Evelyn, her eyes filled not with malice, but with a strange, horrified pity. "I knew he was leaving his wife. I didn't know he was a monster." She grabbed her purse, her hands shaking. "Don't you ever contact me again," she hissed at Mark before practically fleeing the restaurant, leaving him alone to face the wreckage. Now Evelyn's full attention was on her husband. How Mark stammered his voice a pathetic croak. "How did you know?" "You underestimated me," Evelyn said, simply, her voice low and cutting. "You always have. You thought I was just the emotional, career-obsessed wife, too busy and too stupid to see the truth. But while you were planning your little getaway with my money and my son, I was doing my own work." She ticked off the points on her fingers, her voice clear and methodical like a doctor delivering a fatal diagnosis. "First, the finances. That jewelry you bought for your mistress, I found it. Then I hired a forensic accountant. He found the offshore account, Mark, the one in the Cayman Islands. He found the nearly $2 million you siphoned from our joint assets and my personal investments over the past 18 months. It's all documented. The authorities will be very interested to see it." Mark's face went from pale to greenish. Embezzlement. It was a word he used for his clients, not for himself. "Second." Sarah Evelyn continued now, gesturing to the woman who stood beside her, no longer a victim, but a witness. "You tried to intimidate her. You tried to legally gag her. But you forgot that she has a conscience. She told me about your bizarre fixation on the male twin, about your attempts to coerce her into signing that disgusting addendum. Her lawyer has her sworn affidavit. You don't have one witness against you, Mark. You have two." She paused, letting him absorb the weight of his predicament. The surrounding diners were shamelessly listening, their lunches forgotten. This was better than any soap opera. Jessica's phone remained steady, capturing every incriminating second. And finally, Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, filled with all the pain he had caused her. "You thought you could break me by taking my son. You were going to tell me he died, weren't you? You were going to let me grieve for a child that was alive and well, living with you and that woman. You were going to leave me with my daughter Amelia, and hope I'd be too shattered to ever look deeper." She leaned in closer, her face inches from his. "Did you ever for 1 second stop to think about what that would do to a person? To the mother of your children? Or was I just collateral damage in the grand plan of Mark Thompson?" Mark had no answer. He could only stare, his world collapsing inward. The charm, the confidence, the arrogance, it had all been stripped away, leaving behind the small, pathetic man he truly was. Evelyn straightened up, her composure absolute. She turned to the stunned waitress Chloe, who was still standing nearby holding a water pitcher. Evelyn reached into her purse and pulled out a $100 bill. She pressed it into the young woman's hand. "I'm so sorry you had to witness that," she said kindly. "Please bring this woman," she said, placing a supportive hand on Sarah's arm. "Anything she wants from the menu. And a glass of your finest champagne. She has earned it." Then she turned back to her husband one last time. "The locks on the house have been changed. Your belongings are in trash bags on the curb. A restraining order will be served by the end of the day, ensuring you cannot come within 500 feet of me or my children. Your career, your reputation, that's for you to worry about. My lawyer, Mr. Davies, will be in touch with yours, if you even have one left after this." With that, she gave a slight nod to her sister. She turned the double stroller around, and with the same powerful, deliberate clicks of her heels, she walked away from the smouldering ruins of her marriage, leaving Mark Thompson utterly and completely destroyed in a room full of strangers. As she passed the bar on her way out, she saw Sarah had taken a seat. The waitress was already there, taking her order with a compassionate smile. Sarah looked up and met Evelyn's eyes. In that shared glance, a world of understanding passed between them. It wasn't just a victory for Evelyn. It was a victory for them both. An unspoken alliance had been forged in the fires of betrayal, a new unconventional family unit rising from the ashes of one man's deceit. Evelyn Hayes walked out into the bright Texas sun, not as a victim, but as a survivor, a mother and a woman who had just taken back her life. The aftermath of the spectacular implosion at the Four Seasons was not a whirlwind of chaotic emotion for Evelyn, but a period of methodical, chillingly calm demolition. The video Jessica had taken a silent, damning testament to Mark's public cruelty, and his panicked, sputtering confession was the legal equivalent of a nuclear weapon. Evelyn never had to face Mark again. Her lawyer, a formidable silver-haired man named Arthur Davies, handled everything. Davies convened a single meeting with Mark and his hastily assembled legal team. It was held in a sterile, wood-paneled conference room that felt like a funeral parlor. Evelyn was not present. She was at home, rocking her children. Davies, however, channeled her newfound steel. He didn't begin with pleasantries. He simply placed a tablet in the center of the vast mahogany table and pressed play. The video, silent and stark, played out. Mark's dismissive wave, the cruel words to the waitress, Isabella's horror, and Evelyn's grand, terrible entrance. They watched Mark's face crumble on screen, a real-time disintegration of a man who had lost control of his own narrative. When the video ended, Davies let the silence hang in the air for a full minute before speaking. That he said his voice quiet but carrying immense weight is the court of public opinion. It is also Exhibit A. He then slid a thick binder across the table. This is Exhibit B, a full forensic accounting report detailing the systematic embezzlement of $1.87 million from my client's personal and joint accounts into an offshore entity in the Cayman Islands, an entity, I might add, that lists Mr. Thompson as the sole beneficiary. He produced another binder. And this is Exhibit C, the sworn affidavit from Miss Sarah Jenkins detailing Mr. Thompson's campaign of coercion, his specific and disturbing fixation on the male infant, and his fraudulent attempt to alter a legal contract post facto to eliminate my client's contact with the gestational carrier. Mark's lawyers, who had likely taken the case assuming it was a standard, messy divorce, looked at their client with open disdain. Mark himself sat shrunken in his expensive suit, his face pale and clammy. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out, the arrogant shell removed to reveal nothing but weakness underneath. So here is what is going to happen. Davies continued his tone, leaving no room for negotiation. My client will not be pressing criminal charges for the embezzlement or the conspiracy to commit kidnapping. She has no desire for a protracted media circus that would affect her children. In return, Mr. Thompson will cede all claims to any and all marital assets, including the house. He will relinquish all parental rights immediately and irrevocably. His name will not appear on the birth certificates. He will agree to the permanent restraining order. He will walk away with the clothes on his back and the debts he has accrued. If any single point of this is contested, all 3 exhibits go directly to the district attorney's office and the Texas Medical Board. Are we in agreement? There was no argument. The fight was over before it began. Mark signed the papers with a trembling hand, his signature once a bold and confident scrawl, now a barely legible tremor. He walked out of that conference room, a non-entity erased from the life he had tried to viciously orchestrate. The whispers around Austin were immediate and brutal. The story in its juiciest, most dramatic form leaked from the restaurant staff and patrons. Mark Thompson wasn't just a cheat, he was a villain of operatic proportions. His clients abandoned him in droves. His firm fired him, citing a morals clause in his contract. He was socially and professionally radioactive. Within a month, he sold what few assets he had left, and vanished, rumored to have moved somewhere anonymous in the Midwest, a ghost haunted by the life he had torched so spectacularly. A week after the legal proceedings concluded, a thick cream envelope arrived for Evelyn. It was from Isabella Rossi's attorney. Inside was a typed formal letter of apology. Isabella claimed she was a pawn duped by a master manipulator. She wrote of her own struggles with infertility and how Mark had exploited that vulnerability, promising her the family she'd always craved. While my actions in participating in an affair were inexcusable, the letter read, "I hope you can believe that I was unaware of the truly monstrous nature of his plans for you and your children. I wish you and your beautiful family peace and healing." Evelyn read the letter twice. She felt no anger, no satisfaction, not even pity. She felt nothing at all. Isabella Rossi was a character from a different lifetime, a ghost from a story that was no longer hers. She folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and dropped it into the recycling bin without a second thought. That chapter was closed. Her focus was on the new life blooming within the walls of her home. The house, once so silent and pristine, was now a chaotic symphony of coos cries and the scent of baby powder. It was exhausting, overwhelming, and more wonderful than she had ever imagined. And at the center of this new world, an unexpected anchor had formed Sarah Jenkins. Evelyn had insisted Sarah take a full month to do nothing but recover all expenses paid. But after that month, she invited Sarah and Leo over for lunch. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken questions. They were no longer client and surrogate. What were they now? They sat in the sunny living room, the twins sleeping soundly in a bassinet nearby. Evelyn finally broke the silence. "Sarah, I've spent weeks trying to find the right words, and I've come to the conclusion that there are none. Thank you is too small. What you did for me, what you endured because of Mark, it's a debt I can never truly repay." Sarah, ever practical, shook her head. "Evelyn, you don't owe me anything. We both got out of a nightmare. And you've already given me the thing I wanted most, the security for my mom." "That was just the start," Evelyn said, leaning forward. "That was justice. This is about something else. This is about respect. Sarah, I have never met a person with more integrity or strength than you. What Mark did, trying to reduce you to a function, to an object, it was the most profound insult I have ever witnessed. I want to spend the rest of my life proving him wrong." She slid a folder across the coffee table. "I told you I set up a trust for your mother's care. It's done. She has a room at Oak Ridge waiting for her whenever you're ready. But this, she said, tapping the folder, is for you and Leo. I've spoken to an advisor. I want to set up a college fund for Leo, a substantial one. And for you, you mentioned once that you loved being a teaching assistant, but wished you could lead your own classroom. The University of Texas has one of the best education programs in the country. I want to pay for it. Your tuition, your books, a living stipend, so you can focus on your studies without financial worry. Sarah stared at the folder, her eyes wide with disbelief. She slowly shook her head, pushing it back towards Evelyn. I can't. Evelyn, it's too much. It feels like charity. I have my pride. I know you do, Evelyn said softly. That's why this isn't charity. This is an investment. I am investing in a brilliant, capable woman that I am proud to know. Think of it as a scholarship, the Dr. Evelyn Hayes Scholarship for Remarkable Women. You are its first and most deserving recipient. Please, Sarah, let me do this. Let this be part of the good that comes from the bad. Leo, who had been quietly playing with his action figures, seemed to sense the emotional weight in the room. He looked at the bassinet and then at his mom. Are James and Amelia going to know I was their tummy buddy's boy? He asked with the simple clarity of a child. The question broke the tension. A watery smile touched Sarah's lips. Evelyn's heart swelled. Yes, Leo. Evelyn said, her voice thick with emotion. They are absolutely going to know that. They're going to know you, and they're going to know your amazing mother for the rest of their lives, if you'll let us. Sarah finally looked up, tears shining in her eyes. She gave a small, shaky nod. Okay, Evelyn. Okay. That okay was the laying of a new foundation. Over the next year, the relationship blossomed into something beautiful and unique. Sarah wasn't just a friend. She was an integral part of their lives. She became Aunt Sarah, the one person who could soothe a colicky James when Evelyn was at her wits' end. She'd show up on a Tuesday night with takeout, having sensed from a text message that Evelyn was overwhelmed and would simply take one of the babies, allowing the exhausted doctor a moment to breathe. Evelyn, in turn, became Sarah's biggest cheerleader. She helped her with her university application proofreading essays and coaching her for the entrance interview. When Sarah was accepted, they celebrated with champagne, just as they had on that first day at the Four Seasons. But this time it was in Evelyn's kitchen, a toast to a future Sarah was building for herself. One brisk autumn afternoon, almost a year to the day of the incident, they were in the backyard. The twins, now babbling and crawling, were on a blanket on the grass. Leo was proudly showing them how to stack blocks. Evelyn and Sarah sat on the patio chairs watching. It's funny, Sarah said, her voice reflective. I remember being so scared that seeing them would hurt. A constant reminder of the pregnancy of Mark. Of everything. But it's not like that at all. What is it like? Evelyn asked gently. It feels like victory. Sarah said, a slow smile spreading across her face. Every time I see them smile, every time I see you with them so happy and so completely in your element, it feels like we won. We took the thing he tried to destroy and turned it into this. She gestured at the peaceful, happy scene before them. We did, Evelyn affirmed, reaching across to squeeze her hand. He thought he could isolate us, pit us against each other. He never imagined we would choose to stand together. She looked at her children, her heart full of a love so fierce and profound it eclipsed every memory of pain. I spent years dreaming of a perfect family. I had this image in my head, a loving husband, 2 kids, a beautiful house. The whole package. I got the kids and the house, but the life I have now, it's nothing like the one I dreamed of. She turned to Sarah, her eyes shining with gratitude. It's so much better. It's real. It's built on truth and respect, not on secrets and lies. He wasn't the missing piece of my life, Sarah. He was the obstacle to it. The old dream had died in the fire of Mark's betrayal. But from those ashes, something stronger and more authentic had grown. A family defined not by blood or by contract, but by choice, by courage, and by the unbreakable solidarity of 2 women who had faced the darkness together and walked out into the light, hand in hand. In the end, this wasn't just a story about a husband's betrayal. It was a story of a woman's incredible rebirth. Dr. Evelyn Hayes could have become a victim of her husband's cruelty, but she chose to become the architect of her own justice. She reminds us that true strength isn't the absence of pain, but the courage to fight through it, to protect what matters most, and to rebuild on your own terms. The most powerful twist wasn't the affair or the secret plot. It was the unexpected bond forged between Evelyn and Sarah. 2 women who turned a moment of shared trauma into a lifetime of shared family. Their story is a powerful testament to resilience, integrity, and the idea that sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the one you thought you had. Picture a sprawling driveway lined with century-old oak trees, their branches forming a grand, shadowy canopy. At the end of this quiet approach stands the majestic Beauclair mansion, its marble columns gleaming under the moonlight. In the hush of midnight, a sleek black limousine pulls up to the front steps, delivering the triumphant millionaire Donovan Pierce. He's not alone. Clinging to his arm is Serena Quinn, a dazzling model with secrets of her own. Donovan steps out, brimming with confidence, prepared to flaunt his latest conquest. Little does he know, behind those massive double doors, his pregnant wife already waits, with a pair of earth-shattering surprises. Donovan Pierce was born in Santa Barbara, California, in the early 1980s. He was the youngest son of a middle-class family whose only luxury was a subscription to National Geographic. His parents, Randall and Josephine Pierce, both taught at the local community college. Though they were hardly wealthy, they instilled in Donovan the idea that knowledge could open doors that money alone could never pry open. Donovan, a sharp-eyed, wiry kid with a stubborn streak, found solace in reading about faraway lands. He dreamed of traveling to Africa, exploring the Amazon, and someday having enough money to live in a grand estate of his own. In high school, Donovan's natural charm made him popular among peers. Though not an exceptional athlete, he excelled in debate and showed a fierce determination to win any argument. Teachers praised him for his intelligence and tenacity, but behind the confident demeanor lay an unsatisfied hunger. He wanted more, always more. This insatiable thirst for success would become his defining trait, one that propelled him through life at breakneck speed. By the time he graduated, Donovan had his sights set on Stanford University. Through scholarships and financial aid, he secured enrollment in the prestigious institution. There, he fell in love with economics and business. By senior year, he was running an investment club with 40 members. They pooled their modest funds and tested the volatile waters of the stock market. Donovan didn't just want to break even, he wanted to crush the market. Armed with cunning strategies and long nights studying charts, he managed to bring their returns to remarkable heights. Word spread about his uncanny ability to see market trends before they became mainstream. Upon graduation, Donovan accepted a position at a well-known financial firm in New York. Only 22, he was already sitting in conference rooms with high-profile clients, including the likes of Warren Buffett's associates and other billionaires scouting fresh talent. Donovan took every opportunity he could to glean wisdom from these industry titans. His nights were spent with spreadsheets, analyzing stock movements, and his days were consumed by endless networking. Over the next decade, Donovan rose to prominence. He founded his own investment firm, Pierce Capital Management, and took his net worth from a humble few $1,000s to tens of millions, then hundreds of millions. Eventually, his name appeared on the covers of financial magazines. He became a recognized figure, invited to speak at conferences worldwide. Yet Donovan's ambition was boundless. He set his eyes on surpassing every record in the book and building a personal life that reflected his success. It was during this lofty ascent that he met Elizabeth Radcliffe, a descendant of old money. Elizabeth was a well-educated philanthropist, known for championing causes related to women's health. She was radiant in a quiet way, elegant, thoughtful, and with a moral compass that ran deeper than Donovan's relentless drive. Her mother, Caroline Radcliffe, was once part of a philanthropic circle involving the late Princess Diana, donating to charitable organizations across Europe. The Radcliffe heritage included a storied estate in the Hamptons and connections to aristocrats in England. Donovan was attracted to Elizabeth's poise and the air of dignity she carried wherever she went. Their relationship started gently long walks by the shoreline in East Hampton, quiet dinners at exclusive clubs, intellectual discussions about the future of finance and philanthropy. Before long, Donovan realized that Elizabeth wasn't just another accessory to be paraded around. She was a pillar of wisdom and stability, someone who kept him tethered to his humanity when greed tugged him off-center. The world watched in fascination when Donovan and Elizabeth wed in a grand ceremony at the Radcliffe family's estate. Media outlets splashed their pictures across the front pages, calling it the merger of new money and old-world grace. In an unexpected twist of sincerity, Donovan's vows to Elizabeth were heartfelt. He promised to love, protect, and treasure her, never letting wealth overshadow his devotion to her and any future family they might have. But the shadows of desire and ambition sometimes morph into darker forms. Even as Donovan soared to greater financial heights, he found himself haunted by a restless energy. He wanted excitement, passion, anything to satiate an appetite for novelty that neither Elizabeth's serene presence nor his legitimate business triumphs could fully feed. And so the seeds of betrayal were sown. Elizabeth's life had revolved around philanthropic ventures long before she met Donovan. But her marriage brought new challenges. She struggled to find a balance between supporting Donovan's insatiable ambitions and preserving her own identity. With each passing year, Donovan's name grew in the financial sector, which meant more publicity, more parties, more demands. Elizabeth attended numerous galas as the gracious hostess. She wore dazzling gowns, smiled for photos, and patiently listened to endless conversations about stocks and corporate expansions. In private, Elizabeth was not as meek as the media painted her to be. She had her convictions. She often confronted Donovan about certain investments that seemed questionable, environmentally damaging ventures, profits extracted from borderline unethical deals. Donovan would smile and reassure her that everything was within legal bounds. "This is how we fund your charities," he teased. "We do well, and then we do good." Most of the time, Elizabeth would sigh, letting the conversation fade. She recognized that Donovan's approach to business was a far cry from her father's genteel style. Still, she believed in her husband's underlying decency. Years into the marriage, Elizabeth yearned for a child. At first, Donovan brushed off the topic. "Let's solidify the business," he would say. "Let me cross a few major milestones, and then we'll talk about starting a family." Deep down, Elizabeth suspected Donovan was afraid to be pinned down by the responsibilities of fatherhood. He thrived on risk spontaneity and the freedom to jet off to Europe or Asia at a moment's notice if a deal demanded it. However, the unstoppable march of time and a near-death experience, Elizabeth's father had a sudden stroke, galvanized them. Realizing how fragile life could be, Donovan agreed they should try for a child. In the following months, Elizabeth discovered she was pregnant, and the new reality thrilled her. She glowed with expectancy, her philanthropic work pivoting to focus on maternal health and child welfare. Donovan seemed happy about the news at first, but his reaction lacked the effusive zeal Elizabeth had hoped for. She told herself it was simply Donovan's nature to remain collected, even about momentous life changes. During the pregnancy, Elizabeth took refuge in the quiet comforts of Beauclair Mansion, an estate the couple had purchased in the countryside of upstate New York. Surrounded by lush forests and rolling hills, it provided the perfect retreat from the swirling chaos of Manhattan life. There, away from public scrutiny, Elizabeth could focus on preparing for motherhood. Donovan often visited on weekends, always claiming he was too busy with urgent business deals during the week. As months rolled on, Elizabeth began to suspect that Donovan's late nights and business trips might not all be about closing deals. Even so, Elizabeth tried to cast aside her doubts. She had twins on the way, 2 lives growing within her 2 blessings that she believed would knit her and Donovan closer together. She wrote in her diary each day, documenting every emotional shift, every flutter in her belly, and every dream she had of a future filled with children's laughter, echoing through the mansion's halls. In these private moments, Elizabeth recounted her grandmother's stories of how love in a marriage was tested in unthinkable ways, but devotion and faith often carried couples through the darkest storms. She had no idea that her test would come so soon, or in such a heart-wrenching manner. Serena Quinn was the kind of woman people instinctively watched as soon as she walked into a room. With almond-shaped hazel eyes and wavy auburn hair cascading to her waist, she emanated a fiery energy that demanded attention. She had been raised in a modest household in San Diego, her father a retired Marine, her mother a struggling painter. Despite their limited means, Serena's parents poured their hearts into supporting her talents, whether it was ballet painting or modeling. By 18, Serena signed with an upscale modeling agency and discovered a taste for the finer things in life. The swirling lights of fashion, shows designer gowns, and the glittering stares of cameras dazzled her. She lived for backstage parties and exclusive VIP events where she rubbed shoulders with celebrities and moguls. Over time, she learned how to charm men of power. That charm wasn't always innocent. For Serena, it became a method of survival and advancement in a cutthroat world. If she played her cards right, she could secure financial stability that might otherwise elude her. Her path crossed with Donovan Pierce on a private yacht off the coast of Monaco. Donovan was there for a high-profile tech conference, and Serena had been hired to model for a European luxury brand. The second Donovan saw her laughing on the deck, wearing an opulent emerald gown that clung to her figure, he felt an old, forbidden spark ignite. He introduced himself with characteristic smoothness, Donovan Pierce, of Pierce Capital Management. Might I ask whose stunning presence I'm fortunate enough to share this deck with? Serena knew the name anyone in high society did. She smiled coyly. Serena Quinn. A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Pierce. Over champagne flutes, they exchanged banter about the future of cryptocurrencies and the enthralling but superficial nature of fashion. She was witty. He was enthralled. One conversation led to another, and soon the shimmering lights of Monaco's coastline faded into the hush of the night. Donovan found himself lost in Serena's raw magnetism, a stark contrast to Elizabeth's graceful composure. Despite knowing full well that he was married, his ring was conspicuous, and the media had documented his marriage extensively. Serena fueled Donovan's flirtation. To her, men like Donovan offered not just adventure, but entry into circles with deeper pockets. The moral transgression didn't worry her. She had grown accustomed to seeing powerful men cheat on their wives, and in her line of work, infidelity was treated as a negotiable taboo. Before the yacht docked, Donovan and Serena shared a clandestine kiss on the upper deck, hidden from prying eyes by the summer darkness. Donovan told himself it was just a fleeting moment of indiscretion. He was a man on top of the world. Why shouldn't he savor every flavor of pleasure life offered? But fleeting infatuations can quickly grow into an all-consuming secret. When Donovan returned to New York, he found excuses to see Serena again, ostensibly for business, though they both knew it was anything but. She became his shadow at exclusive clubs, late-night penthouse soirees, and business trips where he needed a companion to keep him entertained. He showered her with designer handbags, diamond jewelry, and even helped her land more lucrative modeling gigs. Serena, for her part, clung to Donovan's generosity, offering him the rush of a hidden romance he couldn't get from his stable married life. Weeks turned into months, and their affair deepened. Serena reveled in the luxurious life Donovan provided: 5-star hotels, exotic vacations, lavish gifts. Meanwhile, Donovan craved her presence like a drug, ignoring any semblance of guilt. He told himself Elizabeth was preoccupied with her charities. Her pregnancy, there was no harm in letting off some steam. In a moment of recklessness, Donovan invited Serena to spend a weekend at Beauclair Mansion. It was an impulsive plan, born from a chaotic swirl of desire and pride. After all, Elizabeth was supposed to be spending those days in Manhattan for a friend's baby shower, or so Donovan believed. Little did he realize Elizabeth had cut her city trip short, too exhausted to endure the social rigmarole, and determined to relax in her own home. Destiny was about to orchestrate a collision of secrets, lies, and revelations that would upend everyone's lives. Under the silver glow of a crescent moon, Donovan's limousine glided up to Beauclair Mansion's gates. The estate's sweeping landscape looked hauntingly beautiful. Tall cypress trees swayed, and the ornate fountain at the entrance sparkled with watery moonbeams. Serena leaned against Donovan in the back seat, her manicured nails lightly tracing patterns on his arm. She giggled. "I can't believe you own all of this. It's like a castle from a fairy tale." "Wait until you see the inside," Donovan bragged. "Your jaw will drop." He had always wanted to show off Beauclair to Serena. It was one of his ultimate trophies, a testament to how far he'd climbed from his humble upbringing. He had told the chauffeur to arrive late, betting that the staff would be minimal at this hour. Normally, Elizabeth might have been at the mansion, but Donovan was confident she was in Manhattan until Monday. He anticipated a weekend of unrestrained passion and indulgence, free from prying eyes and moral repercussions. To ensure privacy, Donovan had earlier texted Mrs. Hathaway, Beauclair's long-standing housekeeper, telling her to take Sunday off. He explained that he had a private gathering with an important client. Mrs. Hathaway dutifully obeyed, leaving only a skeleton crew on night duty. Donovan had also given strict instructions to keep the gates closed and to remain out of sight unless summoned. Everything was orchestrated like a stage play, with Donovan as the star performer. However, Donovan's carefully crafted plan crumbled the moment the limousine approached the circular driveway. The grand double doors of the mansion swung open, and out stepped Elizabeth. Clearly pregnant, her usually gentle face etched with outrage. Her hand rested protectively on her belly, the fabric of her pale blue maternity dress fluttering in the night breeze. The overhead carriage lights illuminated her figure, making her look both ethereal and formidable. Donovan felt his breath catch in his throat. Confusion and dread erupted within him. For a moment, Serena was just as stupefied, her eyes darting between Donovan and the furious woman on the threshold. "Who is that?" she whispered sharply, though deep down she suspected the answer. No one spoke as the driver opened the door. Donovan stepped out first, feeling as though he were walking into a vortex of shame and disbelief. Elizabeth's voice finally cut through the silence. "So it's true," she hissed. "All the late nights, the secret phone calls, I tried to tell myself I was just being paranoid." Donovan opened his mouth but couldn't form words. Elizabeth's expression twisted a lethal mix of heartbreak and anger. Her gaze flicked to Serena, who also emerged from the limousine, her face partially hidden by large designer sunglasses she'd neglected to remove. For a second, Serena contemplated slinking back inside the car, but she was too frozen to move. Beneath the mansion's elegant facade, the entire world was about to unravel. Inside Beauclair's sweeping foyer, marbled floors gleamed under a chandelier of crystal teardrops. Donovan stood rooted near the grand staircase, Serena a few feet behind him, feeling acutely like an intruder. Elizabeth, with tears in her eyes, demanded answers. Her voice echoed off the polished surfaces, driving home the magnitude of this confrontation. "How long has this been going on?" she shouted, eyes locked on Donovan. "How many times have you lied to me?" Serena's gaze darted nervously. She cleared her throat and decided on an apology, but it sounded hollow even to her own ears. "I'm so sorry." I didn't realize Elizabeth cut her off. Didn't realize what exactly? That he has a wife? That I'm carrying his children? Her voice trembled with bitterness, and her hands pressed against her swollen belly. Donovan finally snapped out of his stupor. "Elizabeth!" He began stepping closer. "I didn't mean for any of this." She pulled away, tears shimmering on the brink. "Don't come near me." At that moment, thunder rumbled in the distance. It felt as though nature itself lamented the betrayal unfolding within Beauclair's walls. Donovan's mind churned, searching for a plausible explanation, an apology, a gesture that might quell the fury and heartbreak swirling through the foyer. Yet nothing he could say would excuse what he'd done. Behind him, Serena said softly, "I'll just get my things and go." She aimed for an exit strategy, hoping to salvage any shred of dignity. But Elizabeth wasn't done. "So you leave now, and what then? Another rendezvous in some penthouse next week? Another weekend in a mansion you both think you own?" She shot Donovan a look of pure venom. "You want to embarrass me in front of the entire world, Donovan. Because the paparazzi will eat this alive. There's no hiding from it." A hush enveloped them, broken only by the faint pitter-patter of rain starting outside. Serena gripped her handbag, panic in her eyes. Donovan realized in that instant the severity of his situation. A pregnant wife, a mistress, and a public image that could collapse under the weight of scandal. Before anyone could speak again, Elizabeth crumpled to her knees, a sharp cry escaping her lips. Donovan rushed to her side, alarmed. "Elizabeth!" he exclaimed. "What's wrong?" Her face contorted in pain, her arms instinctively encircling her belly. I think something's wrong with the babies." The sight of Elizabeth in apparent distress jolted Donovan's paternal instincts. He forgot about Serena, about the affair, about everything else. He scooped Elizabeth into his arms. "We need to get you to the hospital," he said, voice trembling. At his instruction, the still-present chauffeur quickly rearranged plans to drive to the nearest emergency room. By now, Serena was shaking, unsure if she should stay or slip out unnoticed. Ultimately, she followed them to the limousine perched uncomfortably in the back seat, while Donovan cradled Elizabeth. The ride felt like an eternity each second, thick with tension and fear. Never had Donovan felt so powerless. This was not a financial crisis he could fix with a quick injection of capital or a brilliant stock trade. He was on the brink of losing everything he claimed mattered to him, and possibly even losing the unborn children he had so carelessly taken for granted. They arrived at St. Bernardine's Medical Center in the dead of night, the doors of the emergency ward sliding open under harsh fluorescent lights. Nurses rushed Elizabeth into an examination room, Donovan trailing closely behind. He hovered by her side, watching with dread as monitors beeped and doctors administered IV lines. Serena lingered in the waiting area, hands clasped tightly, face pale. She felt starkly out of place. A nurse, noticing her anxious demeanor, whispered, "Are you family?" Serena shook her head, barely managing a polite smile. She took a seat, struggling with a mix of guilt, fear, and resentment. Resentment toward Donovan for putting her in this humiliating position. Guilt for playing a role in what might be a catastrophic medical emergency. Inside the examination room, the obstetrician delivered cautious news. Elizabeth was having contractions prematurely, possibly triggered by emotional stress. The babies were at risk if her blood pressure didn't stabilize soon. Donovan felt a crushing weight. This was the real consequence of his duplicity. Not just an angry spouse or a ruined social reputation, but the potential harm to innocent lives. With quiet efficiency, Elizabeth was transferred to a private room in the maternity wing. Donovan sat by her bedside, stroking her hand, feeling both helpless and regretful. He tried to speak to offer some comfort, but Elizabeth flinched away. Her eyes flickered with pain and betrayal. She was a woman who had given her heart, body, and trust to a man who'd taken all three for granted. Hours crawled by. The hospital's white corridors and antiseptic odor provided the backdrop for Donovan's introspection. He had always prided himself on having control over markets, over deals, over his life's narrative. Yet here he was, powerless. In the waiting area, Serena wrestled with her own turmoil. She texted a friend. "Stuck at a hospital. Disaster night. Call you later." She couldn't bring herself to leave. A part of her needed closure, needed Donovan to acknowledge her. But as dawn approached, she realized how naive that longing was. She overheard bits of conversation between nurses. Elizabeth was stabilized, the twins appeared unharmed for now. But the emotional damage was incalculable. Eventually, Donovan emerged from Elizabeth's room, dark circles under his eyes. He approached Serena, who stood up hastily, her posture stiff. In the empty corridor, they exchanged hushed words. "Are you okay?" Serena asked, her voice trembling with concern. "Not really." Donovan admitted, his tone frayed. "Elizabeth's resting now. The babies seem to be okay, but it was close. I can't." He swallowed, unable to complete the thought. Serena nodded slowly, tears threatening to spill. I didn't want this to happen. Donovan let out a shaky breath. Go back to the mansion, or a hotel. I'll make arrangements for you. But I can't leave Elizabeth. Serena searched his face, hoping for some signal that their relationship mattered. Instead, she saw a broken man, guilt-ridden and desperate to cling to his wife and unborn children. Words felt futile. She only managed a nod before turning to walk away, the corridor lights flickering overhead like a silent judgment. In that moment, Donovan understood that the life he thought he could compartmentalize was shattered. There would be no neat division between his respectable existence with Elizabeth and his clandestine affair with Serena. Everything had collided, and the fallout would test every inch of his fortitude and Elizabeth's. News travels fast in privileged circles. By mid-morning, Elizabeth's parents, Andrew and Caroline Radcliffe, arrived at the hospital in a flurry of concern and indignation. Caroline, her posture ramrod straight, confronted Donovan in the corridor. "You liar!" she hissed, jabbing a finger at his chest. "You made promises, Donovan. My daughter's life and the lives of my grandchildren are at risk because of your disgraceful behavior." Andrew, a gentleman by nature, seemed older and more frail than usual, grief etching lines across his face. "I trusted you," he said softly, his voice laden with disappointment. "You were the one who insisted on waiting for children until you were ready to be a father. And now this Donovan bowed his head, too ashamed to meet their gazes. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "Truly I am. Nothing I say will justify what happened." Caroline gave a scornful laugh. "That's about the only honest thing you've said so far." With Elizabeth stable but emotionally shattered, the medical staff advised minimal stress to prevent another crisis. It was agreed that for now, Donovan could stay at the hospital. He was, after all, Elizabeth's next of kin, but the Radcliffes made it clear they'd watch him like hawks. Every hour, Donovan checked in on Elizabeth, who maintained a stony silence. She gazed out the window, tears occasionally sliding down her cheeks. Sometimes Donovan tried to hold her hand or whisper an apology. Each time, she pulled away. When evening arrived, the Radcliffes insisted on a family discussion without Elizabeth. Donovan, Andrew, and Caroline convened in a small hospital cafeteria, the smell of coffee and antiseptic heavy in the air. The conversation was tense voices, kept to a low hush. Caroline wasted no time. "Donovan, we want you to leave Elizabeth alone until she recovers. You'll take care of her medical expenses, of course, but you're to stay away until she explicitly asks for you." "Understood." Donovan's mouth felt dry. "Elizabeth is my wife. I can't abandon her in the hospital." Andrew softened his tone. "We're not saying abandon her. We're saying give her space. Right now, your presence might be doing more harm than good." Caroline's eyes narrowed. "Who knows how many indiscretions you've had behind her back? As far as I'm concerned, you have a lot of explaining to do." "Yes," Andrew agreed. "And perhaps to a divorce lawyer as well." The word divorce lodged like a bullet in Donovan's chest. He'd never considered that Elizabeth might actually leave him and take the children with her. The possibility ripped open a chasm of fear. At that moment, Donovan realized how precarious his entire empire was. Losing Elizabeth didn't just mean losing the facade of a happy marriage. It could also mean losing the moral anchor that had partially legitimatized his high society persona. Without Elizabeth, Donovan Pierce was just another scheming, heartless tycoon with questionable ethics and no family to give him depth or redemption. "Please," he murmured, voice raw. "Don't talk of divorce yet. Let me do whatever it takes to earn her trust back." Caroline exhaled sharply. "That's up to Elizabeth. For now, respect her wishes. If she wants to see you, fine. If she doesn't, you'll keep away." Donovan nodded, too grief-stricken to argue. The only thing that mattered now was Elizabeth's health and the safety of the twins. Little by little, he realized the irreparable damage he'd caused. If he ever wanted to regain Elizabeth's love, or even her tolerance, he would have to face an arduous road of restitution, if such a thing was even possible. The weekend passed in a blur. Elizabeth showed signs of improvement, though her emotional wounds were far from healed. Donovan took Caroline's advice and stayed mostly away, visiting briefly when Elizabeth gave the green light. He spent his nights at a penthouse suite in a nearby hotel, making calls to business associates and cancelling all non-essential trips. Serena Quinn, meanwhile, disappeared from his immediate orbit. He'd arranged for her to stay in a luxurious suite at the Ritz-Carlton, and he covered the tab without question. Their exchanges were reduced to terse text messages. She resented being sidelined, but had no choice. During this tumultuous period, Donovan discovered that personal crises had a way of exposing hidden vulnerabilities in his business empire. A damaging rumor circulated that he was stepping away from Pierce Capital Management due to family issues. Boards of directors, already anxious about market fluctuations, began to question the stability of Donovan's leadership. Some clients hinted they might shift their funds elsewhere if Donovan couldn't personally oversee their accounts. In the midst of these professional woes, Donovan received an unexpected visitor, Rita Halberd, a young journalist from a prominent financial magazine. Rita had sensed the scandal swirling around the Pierce household and wanted an exclusive story. She cornered Donovan in the hospital lobby, a polite but determined expression on her face. "Mr. Pierce, I'm so sorry to bother you at this difficult time." She began pressing the record button on her phone. "But rumors are circulating about trouble in your personal life affecting your company. Is there any comment you'd like to make?" Donovan forced a composed smile. "I don't discuss personal matters with the press, Miss Halberd. My family is my priority right now. Pierce Capital Management remains fully operational." Rita persisted. "Any truth to the allegations about an affair causing your wife's hospitalization?" His jaw clenched. No comment. When a security guard intervened, escorting Rita away, Donovan felt a jolt of dread. Despite his best attempts to keep the scandal under wraps, the story was leaking. He later discovered that paparazzi photos of him and Serena in Monte Carlo had been making rounds online, fueling speculation. The worst part was that Elizabeth's heartbreak was now tabloid fodder. Back at Beauclair Mansion, Elizabeth returned to recuperate under medical supervision. Her parents insisted on staying with her, but she also had some quiet moments to reflect. Late one afternoon, Elizabeth found her way to a seldom-used drawing room lined with dusty oil paintings of the estate's previous owners. There she sank into a velvet armchair, a cup of chamomile tea in hand. Her mind replayed the last few days, the confrontation, the hospital, scare, the taste of betrayal. She recalled times when Donovan had been tender and loving, such as the night he proposed. He had taken her to a small island off the coast of Croatia, where they strolled along a moonlit beach. He promised her a life of wonder and fulfillment. Now those sweet memories clashed with the stinging reality of his infidelity. She wondered if she had been naive, ignoring subtle warning signs all along. The late-night calls, the new cologne that smelled nothing like Donovan's usual preference, the random missing hours he could never fully explain. Perhaps she should have confronted him sooner. Perhaps she should have demanded he slow down, focus on their marriage before it was too late. But regrets, she realized, could never undo the present. In a small burst of determination, Elizabeth pressed a hand against her belly. The twins moved gently, as if sensing her emotions. She whispered, "We'll be okay. With or without him, we'll make it." For all her heartbreak, Elizabeth realized she wasn't powerless. She had the children to think about, and her own dignity. If Donovan thought he could just walk in and out of their lives at will, he was mistaken. Serena Quinn, temporarily sequestered in the Ritz-Carlton, found that the novelty of plush robes and room service quickly waned when tethered to a scandal. She felt like a caged bird, feeding on scraps of reassurance from Donovan's sporadic texts. "We'll talk soon," he would say, or "Need time to handle family matters." Weeks ago, Serena would have found these messages acceptable, even promising. Now they felt dismissive. She resented being treated as an inconvenient afterthought. One evening, in a fit of frustration, she sought out an old friend in the city, a PR specialist named Miranda Vale. Over cocktails, Serena vented about her predicament, the broken promises, the mansion fiasco, and her uncertain future. Miranda listened with rapt attention, occasionally nodding or taking a sip of her martini. "You're so worried about Donovan's image," Miranda observed. "But what about yours? You stand to lose modeling contracts if this scandal blows up. Or you might actually use it to your advantage if you play your cards right." Serena bristled. She wasn't looking to become some gossip sensation. Yet the suggestion swirled in her mind. How could she salvage her own life? Maybe even elevate her status from this mess. A few days later, Miranda set up a clandestine meeting with a tabloid journalist, Kevin Brown, who was offering top dollar for an exclusive interview from the other woman. Serena vacillated. Did she really want to risk Donovan's wrath by selling their story? But the more Donovan ignored her calls, and the more anxious she felt about her livelihood, the more tempting the offer became. Finally, after one particularly icy text from Donovan, "I can't talk right now." "Please stop calling," Serena snapped. She had built her entire adult life on leveraging opportunities. Why should Donovan Pierce escape unscathed, preserving his marriage and reputation, while leaving her hung out to dry? So Serena met with Kevin Brown in a posh rooftop lounge, wearing oversized sunglasses and a scarf to hide her identity. She demanded a sizable sum for any details about her affair with Donovan Pierce. Kevin, practically salivating at the prospect of a sensational scoop, agreed. Over hours and multiple drinks, Serena spilled enough intimate details to fuel a front-page headline in every major tabloid. She revealed their first meeting in Monaco, the hush-hush texts, the gifts, the clandestine weekends. The only thing she kept vague was the fiasco at Beauclair Mansion. Some details, she reasoned, might prove too dangerous or humiliating if fully exposed. By the time she left, the weight on Serena's shoulders felt partially lifted. She knew the story would break soon, that Donovan would likely feel betrayed and furious. But she also knew she needed to watch out for her own interests. If Donovan wasn't going to make good on his unspoken promises, if he was going to return to Elizabeth and freeze Serena out, then maybe Serena could seize control of the narrative. In a world where wealth and reputation meant everything public sympathy could be leveraged, perhaps in the end, she'd emerge from the scandal not as a regretful mistress, but as a cunning survivor. A week later, the tabloids erupted with headlines. Exclusive model Serena Quinn speaks out on Donovan Pierce affair. The public devoured every detail like vultures on fresh carrion. Pictures of Serena in Monaco in Donovan's penthouse and near Beauclair Mansion splashed across websites and social media feeds. Gossip shows debated the morality of powerful men who think they can have it all. Stock pundits speculated whether Pierce Capital Management would suffer a mass exodus of clients. Donovan woke up to a flurry of panicked calls from business partners, lawyers, and friends. Fury coursed through him at Serena's betrayal. He drafted multiple messages to her, each more accusatory than the last. But he never pressed send. He understood that escalation could lead to more damaging revelations. Instead, he pivoted into damage control, a meeting with his legal team to discuss defamation suits, a press statement asserting that personal matters do not affect the integrity of Pierce Capital's mission, and frantic phone calls to major stakeholders, reassuring them he was still firmly at the helm. Elizabeth, meanwhile, read the tabloids with disgust and heartbreak. She had heard enough from Donovan's admissions and the partial truths gleaned from staff at Beauclair. But seeing Serena's smug face on the covers made it all more real. Her parents tried to shield her from the media storm, but the magnitude was impossible to ignore. At one point, Elizabeth snapped at Caroline. "No more. I don't want to hear or see anything about that woman. It's my life, my marriage. I'll decide how to handle it." Yet a part of Elizabeth felt a strange, unexpected relief. The entire truth was now out there, no more secrets lurking. Donovan's humiliating betrayal was an open wound. Sometimes honesty, even when dragged unwillingly into the public eye, can mark the beginning of genuine healing or a definitive end. A few days into the media circus, Donovan managed to speak privately with Elizabeth at Beauclair. She was seated in the sunroom, a blanket over her lap, the warm glow of afternoon light shining through large glass windows. Her pregnancy was still precarious, but stable. A nurse milled about, ensuring Elizabeth's comfort. Donovan took a seat across from her, hands clasped. He looked thinner than usual, his eyes hollow with regret. "Elizabeth," he began, voice quivering. "I know I can never fully undo what I've done. But I want you to know I'm willing to do anything to make this right." She regarded him with a calmness that unnerved him. "You can't unbreak a heart, Donovan," she replied. "You can only see what grows from the pieces left behind." He swallowed hard, remembering the luminous woman he had married. The thought of losing her and the children shredded whatever bravado remained. "I'm committed to therapy, to counseling, anything you need. You and the twins are my priority now. I understand if you hate me, or if you'll never trust me again. But I want to try." Elizabeth let out a slow exhale. "I don't have answers yet. I need time to figure out what's best for me, and for our children. Right now, I need stability, no more public scandals, no more late-night cat-and-mouse games." "Can you promise me that much?" "Yes," Donovan whispered, tears pricking his eyes. "I promise." Elizabeth nodded. "Then give me space. Provide what I need for the babies and me. Maybe in time, we'll see if there's anything left of this marriage to salvage." Donovan rose to leave, feeling the smallest glimmer of hope. He bent down gently, kissed Elizabeth's forehead. She didn't resist, but neither did she reciprocate. He walked away with a reverent hush in his chest, determined to do better, uncertain if redemption was truly within reach. The next several months were a crucible of transformation for everyone involved. Elizabeth stayed at Beauclair Mansion, supported by private nurses and her parents. She meticulously prepared for the twins' arrival, reading parenting books, setting up a nursery, and confiding in a therapist recommended by her obstetrician. She recognized that despite Donovan's betrayal, her children deserved a father if he could prove worthy. Yet she also realized she was no longer the passive partner she might once have been. She contacted divorce lawyers, not as a definitive move, but as a precaution. Boundaries had to be drawn. Donovan embarked on a public apology tour, though not the typical kind with press conferences. Instead, he quietly reached out to key figures in his professional circle, explaining that he was going through a personal crisis and assuring them of his unwavering commitment to Pierce Capital. He donated a significant sum to maternal health charities, a gesture partly inspired by guilt, partly by a genuine desire to mend the harm. In a rare display of humility, he sought out a private counselor, a stepsister of a friend. Sessions were grueling, forcing him to confront his reckless impulses, his childhood insecurities, and the toxic pursuit of wealth as a balm for every emotion. He began to see that the same drive that made him a financial success had also corroded his personal life. Serena, meanwhile, found herself both famous and infamous. She was approached by multiple agencies to exploit her new celebrity, but serious brands viewed her as a liability. She capitalized on her notoriety by launching a line of low-tier beauty products, hawked relentlessly on social media. Certain tabloids praised her for bravery in exposing a billionaire, but the more discerning corners of society labeled her a shameless opportunist. She struggled with the knowledge that she might never escape the shadow of this scandal. On lonely nights in her new penthouse, a parting gift from a short-lived romance with another wealthy patron, she questioned whether she had really gained anything from this affair or simply sabotaged her own integrity. As for the public, the scandal became old news once another sensational headline captured their short attention span: Donovan Pierce and Elizabeth Radcliffe. Pierce were yesterday's gossip replaced by new controversies. However, the financial world did not forget so quickly. Donovan faced extra scrutiny in every new venture. Some of his bolder clients grew leery, no longer seeing him as infallible. He moved carefully, treading water to maintain his empire's stability, while balancing the turbulent waters of his personal life. On a chilly December evening, months after the scandal first broke, Elizabeth went into labor. The staff at Beauclair hustled, calling the doctor and preparing to take her to the hospital. Donovan, who was in Manhattan finalizing a major business deal, was alerted immediately. Without hesitation, he dropped everything. He had a private helicopter on standby for emergencies, and this was certainly one. Within an hour, Donovan arrived at the hospital breathless and terrified. He found Elizabeth already in the delivery room, her face contorted with pain, her parents at her side. She spotted Donovan, and a fleeting look of relief crossed her features before another contraction seized her. All through the grueling hours, Donovan held Elizabeth's hand. Each time she cried out, he whispered words of encouragement, telling her how strong she was, how close they were to finally holding their children. If she bore any lingering resentment, it was eclipsed by the primal, overwhelming task of giving birth. At precisely 2:14 a.m., the first baby emerged a boy, with tiny flailing limbs and a robust cry. The doctor smiled. "He's healthy," she announced, placing the newborn on Elizabeth's chest. A minute later, his twin sister followed, smaller, but equally vocal about her entrance into the world. Donovan was unable to contain his tears as he beheld his children for the first time. He kissed Elizabeth's forehead, flooding with gratitude, regret, and awe all at once. Elizabeth turned to look at him, tears in her own eyes, and gave a single nod of acknowledgement. It was too soon to say if forgiveness was in the cards, but at that moment they were bound by the pure miracle of these new lives. In the weeks following the twins' birth, a cautious détente settled over Beauclair Mansion. Elizabeth allowed Donovan to stay in a guest suite. He took paternal leave from Pierce Capital, focusing on midnight feedings, diaper changes, and singing lullabies. The cracks in their relationship remained, but caring for their infants forged a tenuous bridge. The twins, named Alexander and Amelia, became the center of everyone's world. Donovan discovered that holding these fragile beings in his arms gave him a sense of purpose far beyond financial gain. Some nights he'd find Elizabeth gazing at him, a flicker of surprise in her eyes at how dedicated a father he'd become. Other nights, tensions rose particularly when the memory of his betrayal loomed. But the babies acted as a balm, reminding both parents that they had two tiny reasons to try. Elizabeth's parents helped, but eventually they returned to their own estate, trusting that Elizabeth was strong enough now to stand on her own. A wave of quiet negotiations began between Elizabeth's legal team and Donovan's lawyers' discussions about trusts for the children, potential separation agreements, property, settlements. Yet Elizabeth remained non-committal about a final decision. She sought more clarity on Donovan's sincerity before making her choice. At times, Donovan found himself on the edge of losing patience. He wanted redemption, wanted Elizabeth to declare that they could fully reconcile. But each time he felt that eagerness, he reminded himself that trust once shattered cannot be hastily mended. He forced himself to give Elizabeth space to keep proving day by day that he could be the man she and their children deserved. And so life took on a quiet rhythm. Nighttime feedings under the mansion's vaulted ceilings, squeals of newborn laughter in the morning, and guarded conversations in the afternoon. Donovan learned that fatherhood wasn't just a new label, it was an all-consuming transformative role. And Elizabeth, for all her heartbreak, found moments of solace watching Donovan cradle their infants, singing lullabies in a soft, unsteady voice she'd never heard from him before. Winter gradually yielded to spring, bringing fresh growth to Beauclair's gardens. Sunlight filtered through newly budded branches, and the estate's fountain sparkled under warmer skies. The twins reached 3 months old, their personalities beginning to blossom. Alexander was feisty, always squirming, while Amelia was calmer, observing the world with large, curious eyes. One afternoon, after putting the twins down for a nap, Donovan and Elizabeth found themselves alone in the mansion's reading room. The subdued light cast gentle shadows on the library shelves. It was the first time in weeks they'd had a private moment uninterrupted by crying babies or house staff. Elizabeth studied Donovan for a long moment. "I've seen a change in you," she said quietly. He felt his chest tighten. "I've never been more serious about anything. These months with the twins with you, they've shown me what really matters." Elizabeth pressed her lips together, tears threatening to surface. "I don't trust you fully yet," she admitted, voice trembling. "But I see you trying. And I care that our children have a real family." Donovan reached for her hand. She allowed him to take it this time, though her grip was tentative. "I love you," he said with fervor. "I always have in my own flawed way." She closed her eyes, letting tears slip through. In that vulnerable moment, Elizabeth acknowledged that despite the immense pain Donovan had caused, she still loved him too. Love wasn't a neat equation. It was messy, painful, beautiful, and worth fighting for sometimes. No magical instant of absolute forgiveness followed. Instead, they shared a deep, trembling embrace. Perhaps it was the start of building anew, or maybe a final farewell. But for that moment, it was enough to close the distance that had been tearing them apart. Over time, marriage counseling sessions were arranged. Trust exercises, honest conversations, and raw confessions filled many evenings. Donovan penned a heartfelt letter to Elizabeth, acknowledging every lie and vow he had broken. Elizabeth read it through tears, then wrote a response describing her own fears and disappointments. Though the future remained uncertain, both were willing to try. For the sake of the twins, for the sake of their own hearts, they forged ahead, cautious, hopeful, and forever changed. Months passed gradually, healing old wounds, though scars lingered. Donovan and Elizabeth decided to continue living at Beauclair, turning it into a sanctuary rather than a battlefield. The staff treated Donovan with polite reserve, aware of the rift in the household, but also noticing the genuine effort he invested in fatherhood. Serena Quinn drifted to the periphery of their lives. She launched a small cosmetics brand online, capitalizing on her short-lived tabloid fame, but her presence receded from major headlines. Donovan never reached out to her, and she, sensing no benefit to further contact, eventually moved on to new opportunities. Rumors linked her to an international art dealer, but the story never garnered much attention. In time, the media found fresh scandals to chase. Donovan's public persona stabilized as he demonstrated consistent leadership in his company, all the while making philanthropic gestures, no doubt influenced by Elizabeth's passions. Some cynics claimed he was simply buying redemption, but those closer to him sensed that fatherhood and near loss had sparked a more meaningful shift. Elizabeth remained cautious. Though she allowed Donovan back into her bed, she set firm boundaries about honesty and transparency. She demanded and received proof of Donovan's finances, phone records, and schedules. Some nights, guilt gnawed at Donovan. He realized how easily he used to lie and manipulate. Now each day of truth felt like a small victory. In the hush of dawn, Donovan often rose to check on Alexander and Amelia. He found solace in their innocent breathing, their tiny bodies nestled securely in cribs. As he watched them, he whispered apologies for his past and promises for their future. Each promise was a vow to be better, a father they could respect, a husband Elizabeth could count on. Exactly 1 year after Donovan's fateful return to Beauclair, with Serena in tow, Elizabeth woke before sunrise. She gazed at Donovan sleeping beside her, his hair disheveled, his face peaceful in slumber. She slipped out of bed and tiptoed to the twins' nursery. Sunlight broke over the horizon, illuminating Alexander's curious expression and Amelia's gentle coos. Elizabeth scooped them into her arms, one on each hip, and felt a rush of gratitude so strong it nearly overwhelmed her. Shortly after, Donovan entered, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Morning," he said softly, placing a tender kiss on each baby's forehead. Then he looked at Elizabeth, searching her face for signs of acceptance. She offered a small smile. The tension that once gripped their every interaction had eased, replaced by a quiet understanding. They carried the twins downstairs to the breakfast table, where the staff prepared a light meal. Over coffee and pureed fruit for the babies, Elizabeth cleared her throat. "I have an announcement," she said, drawing Donovan's full attention. "I'm ready to give us a real chance. No more guest suite, no more half measures. But Donovan, if you ever betray me again, that's it. We're done." He felt the air rush from his lungs, relief washing over him. "I won't. I promise." He reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand. Their eyes locked in a moment of unspoken agreement. Months of therapy, raw conversations, and unwavering devotion to their children had led them here, still bruised but willing to live as a unified family. The rebuilding process had been painstaking each day, a test of Donovan's sincerity and Elizabeth's capacity for forgiveness. In that single instant, they both chose hope over resentment, a future over a fractured past. From the brink of a devastating split, to a fragile but genuine renewal. Donovan and Elizabeth's journey reminds us that no life is beyond repair, even in the face of betrayal, heartbreak, and public scandal. Sometimes the hardest lessons come wrapped in pain and regret, but it's how we grow from them that truly defines our story. Through newborn cries and sleepless nights, they discovered a new depth of love and unity, proving that second chances, while never guaranteed, can blossom if nurtured with honesty and perseverance.